What would it be like to finally achieve what you've always wanted to achieve? You know, the movie Bull Durham is about Crash Davis, a minor league baseball catcher who has spent his entire career in the minor leagues only to break the minor league home run record of 247 home runs. And you'll remember from that movie with Kevin Costner, he's actually somewhat dismayed about that record. I mean, he doesn't want to be known as the guy who hit the home run record in the minor leagues. He wants to be known as the guy who hit the home run record in the major leagues. Well, I'm here to tell you that your life was designed and created to be played at the major league level. And today, we're going to be talking about how to become superhuman. EdTalks Live is next. All right, hey there, family. What's up? Welcome to the show. My name is Ed Rush, five-time #1 best-selling author, your host for the most positive place in the planet for insanely implementable ideas. Today, we're going to talk about how you can flat out dial it in and become what I call superhuman. Actually, what we're really going to talk about is you becoming you, the you that you were designed to be, the you that you were created to be, the amazing, stupendous, outstanding you. Now, before we do that, as usual, jump into chat on the right-hand side. Tell me who you are, where you're from, and what you do, even if you are an old-time veteran. And I would love, just out of curiosity, I'd love to hear you tell me, if you are a veteran, how many episodes you think that you've seen of EdTalks Live. We are on today, by the way, we're on episode 67. We are past two-thirds of the way towards 100 episodes. I'd love to hear what you think. Some of you have watched every episode, by the way. I've certainly been here for all of them. But before we get into the core content today, jump into chat. Tell me who you are, where you're from, what you do. Robert was here early. What's up, dude? Good to see you. Welcome to the show. Hey, Jim Butts. Thanks for joining us. Diana, hello. And Salih just joining us today. I'll say hello to the rest of you in just a moment. But before I do that, let me just tell you, today is going to be two parts. The first part, I'm going to talk about our core topic for today, which is becoming superhuman. We'll get into a little bit more of that later on in the next 2 weeks. By the way, I've got some amazing guests lined up for you. Next week, I'm interviewing Marie Carmen Pizarro, who left corporate America, became a client of mine actually, built an incredible, very successful, lucrative business helping women back in the corporate environment. She came out of the gates and made hundreds of thousands of dollars faster than anyone I've seen. And then 2 weeks from now, I've got a former NFL quarterback, big-time CEO coach who's coming in as well, and I'm going to give you that announcement in just a little bit. Jim says 65. I believe you. I believe you. I know, Diana, you've been here for. I know you guys are amazing. All right, so thank you for joining us. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I am going to head up to the whiteboard because today, most of what I'm going to be teaching is actually up on the board there. But as I do that, just as you're joining us, I see a bunch of folks that are just kind of sluggishly getting, come on, dial it in today, okay? Getting into the show. The numbers are starting to creep up just a little bit. By the way, before I forget, I almost never say this, but there is a subscribe button right below here. And when you click that subscribe button, a little bell shows up next to it. Click that bell, it tells you when our shows are. So I'm gonna jump up to the other screen and I'll see you in 4 seconds. All right, so today's show is all about becoming superhuman. And I've got a question for you, which is, what if you could become the person that you were created to be? I want to take you back all the way to military flight school. Now, some of you know I was a Marine Corps fighter pilot. I flew F-18s in the Marines for about 11 years. I was in the reserves for another 2 years, actually inactive reserve for a full 20 years. This is why I'm wearing my Star Wars Stay on Target shirt today. It was actually the movie Star Wars when I was like 7 years old that inspired me to want to become a pilot, okay? And so there are two ways to go about becoming a pilot. There is the civilian way, or at least that's what we call in the military, the civilian way, and then there's the military way, okay? And typically what happens in flight school is you go through a series of trainings. You learn how to basically fly the plane. You learn how to turn the plane. You learn how to land and take off. You learn how to talk and use the radio. You know how to do basic emergency maneuvers. You learn how to pilot the aircraft safely if you need to through the clouds or something like that. And typically in the civilian world, to go from just starting out to when you have your private pilot's license, it takes about 60 to 70 hours of training, and the average person does it in some place between about 5 to 7 months. The interesting thing is when you come over on the military side, the average student does this in about 21 days. Not to mention the fact that you're in the military learning to fly, learning to turn, learning to take off, learning to land, learning emergencies, but you're also learning what are called aerobatics, which is you going upside down, barrel rolls, twists, and turns. You're learning instrument flight rules so that you can be able to fly through the clouds. And of course, you're learning how to fly in a military flight pattern, not a civilian flight pattern, which is typically quite different. All that happens in a period of 3 weeks. Now, this is somewhat surprising when you consider the fact that on your very first day and your very first flight, you are an extremely dangerous person. I mean, on your very first flight, I can remember my first flight. I came in, the instructor took me around. I came in for a landing, which was assisted. He actually helped me on my way down to the ground. And then as I was rolling out on the runway, getting ready to push the throttles back up and take off again, as I was rolling out, my instructor just started saying, steer with your feet, steer with your feet, steer with your feet, steer with your feet. And I'm like, what are you talking about, steer with your feet? And what I realized was, later on was, you know, in an airplane, you actually control the steering on the ground with your feet. You fly with the stick and the throttle, but on the ground, you control the steering with your feet. And when I got down on the ground, like anybody who's been driving a car for a few years, you know, I got down on the ground and we started veering right, and I started trying to fly the airplane to the left. And my instructor saying, steer with your feet, steer with your feet, steer with your feet. Now, on a runway, on a normal runway, there's no obstructions. You just have 8,000 feet of concrete to take off and land. But on the side of the runway, there's all kinds of obstructions. There's ditches and signs. And I remember as we were veering off to the right, I was looking at this huge sign on the side of the runway that was indicating the number of feet that we had left in the runway. And I was heading right for this sign, you know, at about 100 miles an hour, with imminent disaster underway. And my instructor saying, steer with your feet, steer with your feet, steer with your feet. And then finally, just before the sign, you know, like I'm ready to cash it in. The instructor calmly takes the controls, pushes the throttle forward, turns the airplane, and then just takes off with the runway. Very nice, very smooth, perfectly controlled. Well, look, on day one as a Navy or Marine Corps flight student, you are deadly, you know. Put a set of skull and crossbones on this guy right here. But by the day 21, you're flying all by yourself in an airplane all by yourself with no instructor. You're literally out in the air on your own, flying, turning, landing, taking off on the radio, doing your emergencies, aerobatics, IFR, and everything. How is that possible? If in one place people are taking 5 to 7 months, why does it take 3 short weeks? Well, the reason comes down to one simple word, and that word is expectation. You see, every Navy student, every Marine Corps flight student makes it to the end of our 21-day training because people expect you to make it to the end of your 21-day training. In other words, you get to the 21 days because everyone gets to the 21 days. Now, I want you to think about athletics for just a moment. You remember that maybe 50, 70 years ago, Roger Bannister broke the record for the 4-minute mile. Many people knew that he was heading on doing that. There were actually 3 runners that were all vying for the first person to do a 4-minute mile. Bannister had actually run a 4-minute mile before he ran the actual one that was timed, but it needed to be the actual 4 minutes needed to be on what was called a closed course. So he had done it before, but then he did it again. And then after Roger Bannister ran his 4-minute mile, runners all over the world immediately began running 4-minute miles. And nowadays, when you go to the Olympics, every single mile winner, in fact, first, second, third, fourth place, they're all underneath 4 minutes. Now, when you think about that, that's kind of strange. I mean, human beings were built of the same genetic structure. I mean, for the most part, people are born a certain way with certain gifts and strengths. And why, if it took almost 6,000 years for someone to run a 4-minute mile, why after somebody broke that ceiling, Why after that did everyone else start to run 4-minute miles? Well, the simple truth is it comes down to expectation. I work with basketball referees, and basketball referees referee basketball players. If you look at the average high school player, like the average high school player is probably as good as the average NBA player 50 years ago. Why? Because the game's gotten better. Strategies have gotten better. Athletes have gotten better simply because of expectation. And what I'm telling you right now is actually one of the keys to becoming superhuman. You see, 40, 50 years from now, the world will be moving faster. People will be processing faster. People will be thinking faster. The world will require more in terms of your performance, but you won't feel like it's more because you're going to be living the world with everyone else 50 years from now. And part of your job as you become superhuman is to find yourself in a place where you are ahead of your peers because you're thinking faster and processing faster. And the truth is, it's not even that hard. I mean, I've gone to events where I've spoken and someone came up to me and said, Ed, the vision and the way that you're talking totally blew my mind, and it made me realize that I was living in a very small world. And so my suggestion for you as we spend a little bit of time today is to grab a pen and take some notes. I have 5 tips on how to become superhuman, and I don't even have that much. Most of the time I teach for almost the entire hour. Today, at about the half an hour point, I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to take your questions on anything having to do with your business or your life or anything like that you want to. All right, so Sally, good to see. Oh, you missed us doing the show every day. I had thought about that a little bit, but that's a lot every day. Hello, Silly. Welcome to the show as well. All right, so if you just joined us, by the way, and I saw that a whole bunch of you just did, this is a show called Becoming Superhuman. My name is Ed Rush. Today is, we're at EdTalks Live, and today's show is designed to show you how to rapidly accelerate your success so that you can achieve what you want faster, 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 okay? And the goal is to get you into a time machine and move ahead about 10 years. I mean, think about this for a second. If you could go back in a time machine 10 years ago, knowing what you know now, with the skill set that you have now, with the marketing skills that you have, the communication, the persuasion skills, oh my goodness, you would totally crush it. And that's your job right now. Okay, now, I'm going to give you the first and probably the most important tip for becoming superhuman. And the first and most important tip is this: obsess. Now, I know what you just said to yourself. Wait a second, Ed. Obsess, that is a word that we don't use positively in our culture. I mean, if you say, like, for example, if 2 wives are sitting together having coffee, you know, and they're like, one wife's like, so how's Ron doing? And the other one says, you know, he's a pretty obsessive guy. That's not a compliment, okay? That's not a compliment. If you're talking about a 15-year-old, you know, and you're like, what does your son like to do? Well, you know, he likes to play video games. Well, how does he like them? He's obsessed. That's not a good thing. But I'm here to tell you that with success, when it comes to the things that you want to achieve in your business and your life, obsession is the only way to get what you want. Let me just tell you, when I get into flight school, I was obsessed with becoming a great pilot. I woke up thinking about becoming a great pilot. I went to sleep thinking about becoming a great pilot. I actually didn't think about anything. I mean, I'm talking like anything. For weeks, I was obsessed about becoming a great pilot. I'm obsessed about becoming a great dad. I'm obsessed about becoming a good man. I'm obsessed about being a great husband. I am obsessed about helping lead this country out of its discouragement and dismay. I am simply obsessed. And I can tell you that every single one of the things I just said is a good thing. Not just because the end justifies the means, but because the means is also justified as well. Okay, so let me give you an example. I happen to know, and by the way, for those of you who just joined us, and I saw a bunch of you just did, my name's Ed Rush. This is Becoming Superhuman. I'm going to do this for about 10, maybe 12 more minutes, and then I'm going to take your questions in chat, so get ready to dial it in. What's up, Scott? Good to see you, pal. Welcome to the show. Good to have you. Hey, Brad. Good to see you as well. Glad to have you here as well. All right, so if you just joined us, today's show is called Becoming Superhuman. My name's Ed Rush, 5-time #1 best-selling author, your host for the most positive place on the planet for insanely implementable ideas. So step one is to obsess. Here's what I mean by obsession. You know what I'm talking about too, because there's been times in your life where like everything you think about is just this one thing, and sometimes in your life that's been such a great thing, and then sometimes in your life that's not so great, okay? And you know what's what in your life. I mean, if you think about something long enough, you're eventually going to take the actions to accomplish whatever it was, whether it's good or bad. So for example, the other day I was driving down my street. So I live right here in Southern California, just south of San Diego. I live in a valley, so I can actually see right across the valley from my office, right out the door of my office that's wide open right now. I was joking the other day. I have 3 settings in my office when it comes to temperature. I have windows and doors. So setting number 1 in San Diego is my winter setting, which is the windows and the doors are open. Setting number 2 is the fall and the spring setting, where the windows and the doors are open and 1 fan is on. And then setting number 3 is the summer setting, which is what I'm on right now, which is the windows and the doors are open. There's 1 fan at the door and a second fan actually literally blowing on me. Okay, that's it. When it comes to San Diego, the door's always open, the doors never close, the air conditioner's never on, but the heater's never on either. All right, so sometimes a little cold, sometimes a little hot, but we live life like I got all 4 seasons. I got like light summer, medium summer, summer, and then medium summer again. That's what we have out here in San Diego. Okay, all right. So back to the point. I don't know where I got off track. All right, so I have a friend of mine. Oh, sorry, I was driving down the street. In the street goes right through our valley. Okay, so I was driving down the street, and we have a liquor store. We have 2 or 3, but like a normal street, you know, that's got the Vons and the gas station. So we have a couple liquor stores, and I was driving by one of the liquor stores, sits right on the street, and I was driving home that day. And as I was driving home, I looked out at the liquor store. And I thought to myself, I've never been tempted to rob that store. And I thought about it, and I'm like, not once in my life have I ever even approached the temptation to rob the liquor store. I've never once gone into a bank and been like, man, I want to rob some of this money. I've never once gone into a 7-Eleven and even thought, like, gosh, it would be awesome right now to rob the 7-Eleven. It's never crossed my mind. And as I was driving by the liquor store and I looked out and realized I'd never thought about that, what dawned on me was, you know, there are people actually in the world who do struggle with that. Like, I mean, there's people walking to 7-Eleven and are like, oh man, I would love to rob this place right now, but I know I can't. There's people walking to liquor stores and they're like, man, I would love to rob this place right now, but I can't. I mean, there's people that do. And the reason I know there's people that do is because there's people that do it. And to do something, you actually have to think of something. In fact, you have to obsess about it. And so a lot of those folks who have committed those crimes have thought about it and processed and thought about what the rewards were. And in certain cases, some of them even weighed the risk. And that's it on a negative side. But I can tell you, there's plenty of things that I've done that I wish that I hadn't done, that I thought about ahead of time before. And the same is true for you. But what if you could take all that energy and move it into a positive funnel to go into the direction that you want to go? And just a reminder, so he says, Bill says, a second fan. Yep, that's the key. Yeah. If it's 110, Bill, though, remember when I was in Texas, I had the air conditioning on. Okay. Hey, what's up, Gina? Good to see you. David Zetz, my man. David saw some. I did this yesterday for some of my referees, or some of this stuff. Okay. Second example, I have a friend of mine who's one of the most influential people in the world in the criminal justice reform world. This man has been working tirelessly in criminal justice for over 30 years. He actually was a state legislator. He got caught in an FBI sting, which turned out to be a corrupt sting. The FBI agents ended up being removed, but he was stuck with some accusations that he couldn't make go away, even though by all accounts he was innocent. And so they gave him a plea bargain and said, look, you can face the judge and potentially life in prison, or you can get a simple slap on the wrist and about 5 years in prison. So he did a plea bargain, went to prison, as a very strong and committed Christian, by the way. And by the time he got out of prison, he was immediately hired by a guy named Chuck Colson, who used to be on Nixon's staff back in the late 60s and 70s, was one of the key players actually in Watergate. Chuck Colson came out to build one of the biggest prison ministry organizations working with people in prisons. And my friend, when he came out, was immediately hired by Chuck Colson to become his president and start working with him in prison ministry. And this former legislature turned convict and inmate became one of the most influential voices in the world for criminal justice reform, and tirelessly working for years and years and seeing no return for his labors. If you remember, the 80s and the 90s, both sides of the aisle agreed basically on one thing. Democrats and Republicans agreed that they were both going to be tough on crime because we had a war on drugs. And for somebody who was trying to upgrade and bring justice to the criminal justice system, it was a tireless and thankless effort until just about 2 years ago, when both sides actually completely changed course and the president passed what's called the First Step Act. If you're not familiar with that, there's a reason, because the media doesn't talk about any good things that the president does. But the truth is, the First Step Act was an incredibly bold step towards bringing justice to the criminal justice system and fairness to people who were wronged. For example, there's people that were in jail for convicted for third strike offenses for marijuana, which today wouldn't even be a criminal offense, but they were in jail for 20 or 25 years for something like that. Well, the First Step Act turned a lot of that over. Anyway, my friend Pat, when I meet with him, we've had several meals together. The last time I went and visited him, we sat down and had a breakfast together. And when you talk to Pat, you talk about criminal justice reform, because this is a man who has spent his lifetime obsessing about a specific topic. And it shouldn't be any surprise that a person who would consider himself a very normal person, he would, by his own words, he would say that, has done extraordinary things because he has been obsessed about those things. That obsession has helped hundreds of thousands of people across the world, and your obsession can too. So I'm going to give you a couple thoughts on how to think and how to act so that you can super accelerate your goals and your dreams. Okay, so grab a pen and write these down. What's up, Dr. Wendy Lee? Good to see you again. Welcome back to the show. By the way, for those of you who just joined us, this is a show called Becoming Superhuman. My name is Ed Rush. This is EdTalks Live. We air every Tuesday and Thursday, every week. And I've got some guests coming up that you're absolutely not going to want to miss. All right, so the first thing I will tell you is an indicator, okay? So this is one of the most important steps to understanding how your mind works. Like a pilot who looks at an instrument panel, you know that's the oil pressure sensor, and that's the engine pressure sensor, and that's my gas gauge. That's actually a really important one, and this is the amount of power that the engine's pulling out, and these are my instruments to tell me how fast I'm going. I mean, a good pilot has his or her hands on all of the indicators. You know how your airplane is operating. Well, as a good entrepreneur, you have your hand on the indicators as well. And I will tell you that the single number one indicator of whether or not you are thinking properly about your goals, your objectives, and your dreams is that you dream about them. Now, when people say that, what they usually mean is that you daydream about them or you think about them. But I'm actually talking about actual sleep dreams. You see, you can control your daydreams. You can control the things you think about during the day. But for the most part, you can't control. I mean, sometimes there's some ways that you can influence them, but there's mostly no way to control the things that are happening in your sleep dreams. And I'll tell you that you'll know that you're thinking properly about your goal or objective when that objective or goal begins to show up in your dreams. You see, your subconscious mind is doing nothing more than processing the things that you've given it to process, right? So, for example, I've read like 15 of the Jack Reacher books. And back in Christmas, I think I read like 3 books in like 4 days. I read a lot in a short period of time. I was off, hanging out on the patio with the kids, reading a book. And I remember one night, after about 4 days of reading Jack Reacher, I had some of the best adventure dreams. I'm talking about this is me with the gun, saving the world, getting the bad guys. And the reason I had those adventure dreams with me and a gun was because I had basically brainwashed myself for 4 days. And the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference. Like when you're reading, the images that you put into your head of Jack Reacher coming around the corner with his gun and getting the bad guys, your subconscious thinks you're participating in that. Your subconscious thinks that's you right there, okay? And what happens is your subconscious begins to process things and to begin to reorganize things at night. So if your dreams and goals and vision show up in your sleep dreams, you know you're doing it right. By the way, some other things may show up there, some things that you didn't want there, some conversations or some relationships or some issues. If that's there, that's an indicator where your mind is there as well. Okay, so this is like a control panel. It's like an indicator to show you the way that you are thinking. Okay, one of the other tips is, I got 5. I'm going to do them really quickly. Is to watch and model. For example, let's say you're not as good at communicating as you would like to. You'd like to be better on stage or maybe on camera. You'd like to speak more eloquently. You'd like to be able to use stories better or analogies better. You'd like to be able to use your body language better. Maybe you're trying to do something like I am, where I just said, I don't know if you caught that or not. I'm trying to eliminate that from my online and offline teaching vocabulary. Well, one of the ways to do it is to just practice like I'm doing actually right now. But another way to do it is to watch and model. The other day I was watching a video with this Catholic priest whose name was Father Mike. Actually, one of the best speakers I've seen in a really long time. And I wasn't expecting to see it come from this angle. It was one of my clients actually sent me the video, but I watched him and I thought, man, there's some things that I can do to improve my communication simply by watching him. And if you watch an hour or 2 or 3 hours of great speakers and then stand up and speak, you're actually going to be better. You're actually going to be improved simply because you're watching. Again, your subconscious doesn't understand that you're just watching a YouTube video, because when your subconscious was created, there wasn't even a YouTube that existed. Your subconscious is participating with this and filtering things, begin to rewire things and begin to recode things to your advantage. Okay, number 3 is mind, move, emotion. And I'm going to get into meditation in just a second, but when you're thinking, so for example, I do quite a bit of visualization. When I was in the cockpit of the F-18, I learned how to do a lot of visualizing. We used to, a buddy of mine, most of us lived in apartments, but a buddy of mine had a house, and in the front of his house, he had a big lawn, and in Texas, the grass grows like a foot every day, okay? So he took his riding mower and made a big oval, like this huge oval, like that on the front of his yard. And like idiots, me and about 3 or 4 other guys, flight students, we would walk around this oval with our hands like this, talking, Bearcat 3-2, 180, ready to land, gear down. What? Bearcat 3-2, 90 degrees, cleared to land. Bearcat 3-2, touch and go. And we would be walking around, and I remember, man, I logged hours walking around in an oval with my hands like this, talking on a fake radio. Now, if somebody was in the apartment across the street, they would have called the police thinking, they're crazy people. There's a cult. There is a cult outside of this house, okay? People walking in a circle, talking to each other, moving their hands around like they're taking some kind of drugs or something. No, you know what it was? It was 3 or 4 flight students practicing our landing pattern. Because it's one thing to sit in a chair. We do something called chair flying. It's one thing to sit in a chair and to practice flying an airplane. It's another thing to move your body, to get your body into the feel, okay? Just this morning, I was sitting in my chair practicing a speech in front of hundreds of thousands of people. I knew exactly the location of the speech. I knew the time of a year that the speech was. I felt the wind hitting my face, and I started to smile as I heard the feedback from the crowd. That's more than meditation. That's mind, move, emotion. When you bring all of those things together, when you're visualizing or imagining something, when you begin to bring all of those things together, your subconscious begins to put a stamp on it. I mean, have you ever noticed that it's when your emotions really get involved that your memory really kicks in? When you think of the times in your life that you have the strongest memory, sometimes it's the moments where your emotions spiked. Ask people who've been in a car accident. They'll remember in detail as the screeching tires, okay? I was in an accident in a Marriott van 2 years ago in Atlanta going to the airport, and it was on ice. I can remember it was like time slowed down, the memory of that. That's because there is emotion involved. There's a lot of good that can happen when you bring in emotion into the situation. I got 2 more, and then I'm going to take your questions on any topic today, and then I'm going to wrap it up. By the way, if you just joined us, my name's Ed Rush. This is Becoming Superhuman. I got 2 more points on this, and then we're going to come right back, and there's a couple of things in chat. So what's up, Barry? Good to see you as well. Diana, thank you for your awesome comment. That was very nice. Gina said she totally used to do that. Yeah, we walked in circles like idiots. But you know what? We all became really good pilots. And there were other guys at the bar while we were doing that. We didn't. That's the way it works. Control of consciousness determines the quality of life. Boy, that is a great quote. I wonder who that's from. Is that from you, Bill, or is it someone else? David says, how often do you have lucid dreams? What's happening with the subconscious, unconscious mind there? I'll hang on to that question for a little bit, and I'll answer it in just a few minutes. Thank you. That's a very good question. All right, number 4. I have a technique that I call the 1-hour spring. I learned this back when I was trying to learn how to pray really well. And I don't know if you're familiar with trying to pray, but it's very difficult because a lot of times you're praying inside your mind and you can be really easily distracted. If you're talking to somebody, it's easy to get distracted, but a lot less than when you're trying to pray, okay? So what I started doing was, instead of trying to be like, I'm gonna pray today for like 30 minutes, what I did was I set my alarm on my phone so that every hour, on the hour, the alarm would go off. And my goal was really simple. I'd set a timer for 5 minutes and I would pray for 5 minutes. And I would do that for about 12 hours during the day. Well, 12 times 5 is a lot. What is that, 60? 12 times 5, 60 minutes. That's an hour. But in 5 short minute increments, because anybody can do 5 minutes, okay? And what I realized is I got so much more done, and I started to train myself to be able to bring myself back to this consciousness and this thought. And so when you set your goals and your dreams and your objectives and the things that you want to accomplish in your life, one of the cool little strategies to be able to do this is what I call the 1-hour spring. And a 1-hour spring is nothing more like setting your clock for every hour, and every hour spending 3 to 5 minutes simply mind, move, emotion around the thing that you want, okay? You want to get a job, 5 minutes. Okay, process that. Just like put it in, get the emotion in. You want to accomplish something athletically, you start to work on that during that time, okay? And then finally, number 5, just another tool that I use is something called first and 10 or last and 10. Okay, so first and 10 is this: the first 10 minutes of your day, do the thing, concentrate and focus on the thing that you want. Or the last 10 minutes of your day, concentrate and focus on the thing that you want. So for example, I wanted to work on gratitude. Some of you have heard me tell this story. When I was working on that, my goal was I wanted to wake up in the morning. First thing in the morning, I wanted to be thankful for 3 things. Boom, boom, boom. Thankful for one thing. Thankful for the next thing. Thankful for the next thing. I realized this started to kick in when the dream that I had right before I woke up in the morning was me being thankful for something. That's because I gave it priority time. And your subconscious, it seems, tends to prioritize what happens first and what happens last. Now I want you to think about this for a second. What happens with most people first? Right here, right? So most people get up out of bed, roll over, check their phone. What do most people do at the end of the day? They're literally laying in bed with their phone. That's the first and last thing people do. Well, what are you training your subconscious mind to do? To simply be a slave to your media, okay? So this is just the big picture stuff right here. Again, I could go deeper on this, and I might. But this is a great place to start to begin training your mind for the kind of success that you want. I'm going to jump over to the other camera, and then I'm going to take your questions in just a second. All right, so over to you. Like I said, I normally go for like an hour and teach, but I had this little bit smaller bit that I wanted to cover today, which I thought would be a lot of fun to cover. And then I want to pitch it over to you for your specific questions. All right, and I do have a question from David Zetz that I'm going to cover. The quote from Bill was, let's see, the quote was, "Control of consciousness determines the quality of life," and Bill said that is. Bill, couldn't you just made up an easy name? So, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Woo! The author of Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. I'm going to pull that up. And show it to you on the old Amazon machine. Hang on a second. By the way, now's a great time to put your questions into chat. You can ask me anything you want on anything having to do with anything. So this is Flo. Sure enough, his name, her name? Who is it? Great. Doesn't even have a picture. Oh, cool. A whole bunch of books on this topic, it looks like. There it is. Thank you, Bill, for the recommendation and also for the quote. I can't pronounce that. Him. Thank you. Him. All right, we got it. All right, so David Zetz, I'm going to answer your question first, and then any other questions you have, and then we'll wrap up the show based on the questions, okay? So David says, how often do you have lucid dreams? What's happening with the subconscious and the unconscious mind there? So for those of you familiar, you'll know what a lucid dream is. If you're not totally familiar with that, a lucid dream is essentially when you are aware in your dreams and you're making decisions in your dreams based on your conscious awareness being operational inside of your dreams. In other words, a normal dream, you're riding a bus. Next thing you know, you're riding a bike. Next thing you know, you're jumping over a wall. Next thing you know, you're talking to the president and you're on an airplane. And you're like, how did I go from the bus to the bike to the airplane? Okay? In a lucid dream, you're saying, I want to go on an airplane, and your dream actually reacts to your conscious thought even though you're dreaming. And it can be a way, if you really do want to train your subconscious, it can be a way for you to do that. So David, I've had plenty of lucid dreams. I used to try to actually get myself purposely into a lucid dream. There was a book that I read. I think the book was called, let me find it. I think it was actually called Lucid Dreaming. I'm pretty sure the one that I read, I wish I could remember the exact one. Pretty sure the one is this one here called Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming. Stephen LaBerge and Howard Reingold. The other one that I recognize is this one by Robert Waggoner. So those are two examples of books that I've heard of. I think I bought the other one. So what's happening is your consciousness is making your way into the unconscious or the subconscious. And people who are well trained at lucid dreaming say it's an incredible way to begin to mold the subconscious. That's about all I have for you on that, because like I said, I worked on for about a month to be able to actually kind of on demand lucid dream, and it didn't work out for me. Although I'll wake up some mornings and go, yeah, I was lucid dreaming, I just didn't know it at the time. And remembering sometimes is one of the biggest challenges in dreaming. So it's been my experience that the quality of my actual sleep dreams improves the better my record keeping is. You ever had that happen where, and in fact it happened last night, but I remembered it, where you wake up and you're like, ooh, that was a really important dream that I just had. well, that's good that I had that. And then you fall asleep, and then you wake up again later in the morning, and you're like, you can't remember the one that you knew that was so significant, okay? That's why for years I used to have a journal sitting right next to my bed, and whenever I had one of those, I'd roll over and literally scribble this ridiculous chicken scratch into my journal, but enough that you could just trigger the memory of what that was. And then once you, like, it's like remembering dreams. And again, I know this isn't the whole topic, this isn't the topic of today, but it was part of what we talked about today. Remembering dreams, my experience with remembering dreams is you wake up, you're like, oh man, I had some dream last night that was really important. I can't remember what that was. It was about today's meeting. And all you actually need is a single snapshot. Like, you just have to go back and just relax your mind enough to be like, I pray it through. I'm like, Lord, just give me like one picture. There it is. And I remember one picture, and then you can work backwards and forwards from that one picture. And so the lucid dreaming teachers will tell you recall and note-taking is actually really important. So one of the very first steps is becoming aware of dreams that you think are significant, then keeping accurate notes on those, because your subconscious knows that you're taking accurate notes and will follow through. Okay? By the way, now's the time if you have any questions at all. We don't have a Ask Me Anything day this week. We will in 2 weeks. So now's the time to jump in if you have any questions or comments or thoughts on anything that we covered today, or anything that you want to ask about. Otherwise, I'll begin to wrap the show up. Gina says, I write entire talks, articles in my head while in the sort of twilight zone before actual sleep, and I finally started getting up and writing them down. I lost so much stuff being too lazy to get up. Yeah, so things do get lost. And then, Gina, just for a mindset thing, if that happens, one of the things that I began telling myself about 2.5 years ago, I was talking to Dan Sullivan. If you don't know Dan, Dan is the CEO of a company called Strategic Coach. They have thousands of people that they coach every single year. And I was talking to Dan, and I said, what do you do on your off days, on your free days, if you have an idea that comes up? You write it down someplace? And he goes, I don't write it down anywhere. And I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, ideas are abundant. He goes, so if I'm on an off day, I just think about the idea and then I let it go. And if it's really important, it'll come back. But if not, another idea will take its place that's just as good. And I thought, you know what? He's right. His thinking about ideas, remember, we look at the world as entrepreneurs as an abundant place. But sometimes we look at ideas as like, oh my gosh, if I don't do this one right now, everything's lost. But the truth is, ideas are abundant too. And so sometimes think about it that way. Give yourself a little bit of freedom to do that. But yeah, journaling and writing things down. The other thing I do quite a bit before I go to bed is I give my subconscious mind a task or a job to work on. Right now, I'm working on the sales letter for Top Gun Consulting. And as the last few nights have gone on, my mind has really begun to process some things that are now helpful for me as I work on this particular process as well. Bill says, remembering dreams for me helps to confirm what I hope to be true. Very good. Wendy Lee says, yes. Gina, yes. Me too. Awesome. All right, so it doesn't look like I have any other questions. Let me check and make sure I didn't miss anything over on the YouTubes. Nope. If you got something for me, comment, thought, or anything like that. The 2 resources I have for you, by the way, this week. Resource number 1 is my latest favorite book. It's called Alter Ego Effect by Todd Herman. You've heard me talk about this like 5 times. This book currently I've sent to like 1 or 2 of my coaching members, just because I think it's so important about how you think about yourself. And the premise of the book is really simple. Book number 2, come on. You haven't read this book. Where you been all these years? The website is below, edrushbook.com. And truly, this book is a book about becoming superhuman, about becoming the person who you want to be. All right? So I'm going to begin to wrap up today's show. Let me just tell you, I think you are amazing and you have an incredible gift that is designed to share with the world. Why not start using just maybe 5 minutes every hour, maybe 10 minutes a day in the morning, 10 minutes at night, to be able to dial in that so that you can begin to become the person who you are. What I just said is actually really important. Not the person you want to be. You actually are the person that you want to be. You're just acting sometimes like you're not, okay? So that is it for today. I like you and I love you. I'll see you on Tuesday. I got a great show prepared for you on Tuesday, and then on Thursday I have a guest that you are absolutely not going to want to miss. Oh, last minute, you got it in. You got it in. Diana said, how do you get paid for a podcast? So Diana, I don't get paid for podcasts. I use podcasts as a brand building and a business building tool, and I would suggest that you do the same thing. I don't have, what an awesome comment, Bill. Thank you for that. Greatest 47 to 60 minutes on YouTube. I love it. I've never asked, I've had people say, you know, my interview's $500. I just moved to the next person. So use it as a brand building tool. Use it as a elevation tool in terms of your connection base as well. The people that interview you can introduce you to other people that you want to be connected to. And then the other thing that I do when people have me on podcasts is I share and promote their show, because that only helps them, but it also helps me too. Okay, so I don't get paid for those at all. All right, so that's it for today's show. I will talk to you next Tuesday. In the meantime, smile. Even though the world is a difficult place, don't forget that when it's darkest, it's easiest for people to see your light. EdTalks Live is out.